Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Health and Wellbeing Board meeting. Before I go any further, I'd just like to pay a particular thank you and welcome to Dr. Thomas, who's representing primary care. Welcome, Dr. Thomas. Melanie Weatherall, who is representing the care sector. And I nearly went to say, and the old chestnut is, Councillor Nanstad. The reason I'm being over-familiar is simply because Councillor Nanstad was the district councillor representative when the Health and Wellbeing Board was first formed. He's stepping in for Councillor Richard Wright today, and it's really lovely to see you, so welcome. Thanks for coming. Okay, so for those of us in the council chamber, I'd like to advise that there's no fire drill planned for this afternoon. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, through reception, and assemble in the car park at the front of the building and await further instructions. So it's those doors. Can I please remind all members to ensure their mobiles and devices are on silent? If you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand and Alison will make a note of those who wish to speak. Can we therefore go on to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Trina, can you tell me, have we any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've received apologies from Dr. Jerry McSorley, John Turner, and we have Pete Burnett as his replacement member. Councillor Richard Wright, and as you've mentioned earlier, we've got Councillor Nanstad as his replacement. Philip Clark is also, we've received his apologies, but he said he's going to observe via Teams. That's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Katrina. Okay, are there any other apologies before I go any further? Can we then move on to item 2, which is declarations of members' interest? Do any of our members have any interest to declare? I don't see any, so we will take that as a no. Can we now move on to the minutes from the meeting that was held on the 13th of June? And first of all, to confirm that the minutes of this meeting, that's pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack, are a correct record. I'm assuming that everybody's read these, so can I ask, is there a proposer for these minutes? Thank you, Councillor Bowkett. And can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bradwell. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's the minutes agreed. Now move on to the action updates, which is item 4. And there are just a couple of action updates, pages 15 to 16, and they're both for noting. Again, are you happy to note all of those, and will you show with your hands if you are? Thank you. Any objections? Any abstentions? Moving on to Chairman's announcements, as I've already mentioned, welcome to our 3 new representatives. Just a couple of other things, other than the item about the HAF programme. Julia, the last meeting that we had, I think you were going to mention the right care, right place. Did you want to just mention it now? Because if we leave it until the next meeting, it's going to be quite long in the tooth. So if you'd just like to give us a brief update or overview.
Thank you, Councillor Willie. So it's right care, right person. And this is really, so we have a multi-agency group that is now meeting, and represented across the different agencies within health and policing. And really this comes from some national work to try to ensure that some of it is demand-led, so to try to mitigate the fact that in policing we're dealing with an awful lot of incidents that stem from health-related or that are mental ill health-related. So some of this is about ensuring that when calls are coming into the police, that there is appropriate triage, that we're looking at which is the best agency to respond, how is it best for agencies to respond to that person who is quite often in crisis. So there's been a lot going on nationally, quite a lot of, I'm trying to use a better word than rhetoric, but I can't think of one, but quite a lot of national discussion and comment around this, because there's a real perception that there's quite a lot of demand on policing that would best fit elsewhere. The approach that we're taking locally, so certainly from a policing perspective, it's one of our Assistant Chief Constables, Chris Davison, who many of you will know, who's pulling together the sort of local response, and it's very much as a team a team response to say, well, how can we make this work for us locally? So involving all those agencies, how can we make this work so that we're not losing people in the system, but that we're delivering some, because I think there are some changes that we do need to make, but that we're delivering them collectively. So quite a lot of work ongoing. I think we'll hear quite a lot more to come. But that's, and thank you for the opportunity to just brief people. The reason I'd asked for it to be mentioned here is I didn't want people to not know, and I know Dr. Thomas obviously knows about it already, that people have heard about it, that I didn't want it to be a surprise or something that people weren't cited on.
Thank you very much indeed for that. That's much appreciated. Okay, so I think that's all the announcements. I'm just looking at Alison to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Again, can we just have a show of hands to accept those announcements? Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. We now move on to item 6A, which is the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy for Lincolnshire, a review update. This item was circulated as part of the agenda pack, pages 19 to 24. The item provides the board with an update of on the review of the Joint Local Health and Wellbeing Strategy. And I just want to emphasise the joint bit there. It belongs to all of us. And I'm now going to ask Alison Christie, who's the Programme Manager for Strategy and Development, and Michelle Andrews, the Assistant Director of the Integrated Care System for Public Health, to present the report and then invite questions from the board. Thank you. I don't know who's starting though. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, the board received a recommendation report following the JSNA prioritisation exercise that we did. And as a result of that, the board agreed that the current priorities in the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy are still relevant, with some changes to some of the wording. So, as noted in the report on page 19, the housing and health priority becomes homes for independence, and we're merging the two mental health priorities and dementia to make one priority. So we're moving from 7 to 5 priorities overall, and the Appendix A shows the new sort of priorities and governance arrangements around those areas. We also agreed that we'd take a life course approach, and we've been working over the summer to think about how that approach is going to actually appear in the document and the steps we need to take. So we also want to develop the document in tandem with the next iteration of the integrated care strategy. So because we're awaiting new guidance on that, we're looking to run the majority of the work between now and sort of the end of January to get the documents finalised. So we've engaged with all the delivery group leads and the delivery groups to start that process to look at what the objectives and the measures are going to be that they're going to use in the new Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy, and to start that process to pull that information together. On page 20 is the sort of proposed outline, high-level outline timeline for getting that work completed. So the intention is in the December meeting is to bring a presentation rather than a report, just outlining the work to date and the objectives that have been identified by each of the delivery groups, to then have the final document ready for sign-off at the March meeting. So that's any questions?
Okay, thank you, Alison. Michelle, is there anything you wanted to add at all? Okay, in that case, questions, anyone? Councillor Bradwell.
Well, I see that we have got children and young people in the report. So are you going to then work with the officers in Children's Services then and Public Health to decide what we're going to do, or where is the focus for children and young people? Because we know that children with disabilities have huge issues getting the right wheelchair and simple things like that, that they can go about their daily life having a wheelchair that moves fast and not slow.
So each priority identified within the plan will have a start well section. So all of the priorities in the new arrangements will emphasise and have a focus on children right from the outset at the earliest opportunity, and we'll cover all of the vulnerable groups within that. So when we come back in December, hopefully that will help to address some of your comments, but we'll work then through January and into the new year if those want to refined at all. So yeah, we're definitely linking in with both public health and also officers within children's services to ensure children are much more visible and represented across all the priorities. I hope that addresses that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might build on Councillor Bradwell's comment, but when Alison and I met to talk about the physical activity part of the strategy, I was really keen to make sure that the people that are leading on the development of each of the themes are able to have conversations to connect, because we'll all be thinking about children and young people, and there is so much crossover and intersectionality between mental health, for example, physical activity in a healthy way. To just think it's really important that those chapters come together in a cohesive way rather than us all working in silos on our own areas.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Okay, in that case, if we can move to the action required, which is shown on page 19. I won't read it out, well, maybe I will, but it's just to note the content of this report, detailing the next steps and also noting the timescales as well. So if everybody's in agreement with that, could you just raise your hands? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you for that. Now move on to the next item, which is item 6B, which is the unpaid carers paper. Again, this has been circulated as part of the agenda, pages 25 to 36, and a revised report was circulated on the 20th of September. So I just make sure you've got the updated version. And that provides the board with an update on the carers priority. I'm going to invite our officer, Lisa, if she will give us an update. Lisa Loy, nice to see you, Lisa, and to present the report and then invite questions. You've got all the questions coming your way, Lisa. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Loy, and it's a long time since I've attended one of these meetings, but really privileged to be here. I'm presenting this on behalf of Councillor Sneath, who can't make it today. So this report was written just to give some assurance to the board around what we've been doing with unpaid carers. And I'm not going to go into the whole report because hopefully it's self-explanatory. But what I did want to do was just to let you know that this year's been on quite a journey in terms of the carers delivery group, and in turn some of the work that's been going on as a local authority as well. So one of the key things to pick out of here is that following the COVID pandemic, there was quite a burden upon our carers. They didn't have the chance to step down or to not do their duties. So I think that was recognised, and a lot of work at that point was diverted to make sure that we could support carers in the best way that they could out in the community. However, in January of this year, we reinvigorated and reinstated the carers delivery group with a new membership, a new chair and newfound enthusiasm. That group has been really committed. It's been really wonderful to see lots of members from our NHS family join part of that group and truly be able to look at how we can make a difference as a system. One of the things that we realised quite early on is that our strategy was very long. I think it was something like 19 pages long. The group felt that they wanted to be more succinct, and if we wanted to make change, that there was a few things we should pick out that we could make a difference on. And those three key priorities were our workforce and employment, Digital opportunities. We knew that after the COVID pandemic, many more people were using digital opportunities, and whole family approaches to try and work together rather than being fragmented. Those priorities were transferred onto a plan on a page, where we believe that in terms of the next strategy work, we've already got hopefully a good starting point for us to adopt what we've already done. The other things that we did was look at how we can work with our NHS colleagues as well. The priorities which we chose were ones which we felt we had some short-term wins and some longer-term opportunities within those. So that was one piece of work that the group's done itself. We've also created a memoranda of understanding in terms of being able to demonstrate what it is that we're all collectively wanting to do. That's just recently been signed off. We've also worked on the joint strategic needs assessment, and we are completing a NHS, there's a Commitment to Carers national programme, and there's a survey that goes with that. That survey now comes to the Carers Delivery Group, and it has a collective approach to it rather than it be a desktop exercise and completed in silo. The current commission service, so back in October last year, I've got a new model of service which is a new front door, a front door which hopefully makes it much easier for carers to be able to go and have that conversation rather than trying to navigate their way around the system. That new model of service is working really well, and we've taken a strength-based approaches rather than going through a very scripted conversation with people. We've also had the Care Quality Commission, so we've been heavily involved as carers because we do have a statutory duty to ensure that we meet the needs of eligible carers. So we've been part of that. That was very interesting, as well as good to actually demonstrate to the CQC what journey we have been on in the last year. I've also captured on there some of the things we said we would do, and it's quite good to see that we've actually achieved some of those, and some of those are still ongoing. I guess in conclusion, what I wanted to do is say that the Carers Delivery Group has made progress. As a system, we want to make changes which are collaborative rather than work in silos, and hopefully we'll go from strength to strength with the work that we are doing.
Thanks very much indeed, Lisa. Are there any questions from anyone? Councillor Bowkett and then Councillor Marfleet.
Thank you. Well, it's not a question, it's just a congratulations. Lisa and Councillor Sneath have done a wonderful job on the work that you've done so far. I know you've got a lot to do, but you are getting there, and it is such a fantastic, reading this, it's the work that's been done already to help carers, because we know carers can be very, very lonely. When you're looking after somebody who can be with dementia or mental health or whatever, it's a child or an adult, it's a very lonely job, so support is needed. So well done, and carry on the good work.
Councillor Marfleet.
Thank you. Having read this, I mean, yeah, it's a good piece of work, but the one area which I just felt that we were perhaps missing out on was, in effect, it talks about the passports and LPFT. I couldn't help but think that it's not just about the public sector services in Lincolnshire. This should be rolled out more to the businesses in Lincolnshire, and make a start. Now, not every business in Lincolnshire is going to adapt and pick it up and run with it, but you know what? We've got loads of businesses in Lincolnshire that have got good ethics and everything else, and we should sort of open this up to give them the opportunity to take on board this more. You know, we've done the work now for the public sector, and we can roll this out. In November at the Lincolnshire Showground, we have all the businesses come together for, I can't remember what we call it now, but basically they all come together, and we could highlight this, and there's other areas that we could highlight there, going back to the previous agenda of being more active and people cycling to work, and stimulate it with our own, businesses. And I just think that we've done it now. We've set the model on how to do it, and actually we should start to roll it more and connect more with the businesses. And I'd like to see that sort of progressed, really. Having worked with somebody in this situation, I did my best to make sure that she got a good start, and actually did take her around to the health and everything. But unfortunately, she threw in her learning to go back to being a carer and just sort of being a sort of part-time staff in a pub. Not that that was an issue, but it was like she gave up her career path, which was really quite upsetting at such a young age. And there's so many businesses that could help, and I think that really we should try and roll it out and connect better with businesses in Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor Marvleet.
Yeah. So part of the work that we're doing, there is a employment on the plan on a page as a employment and workforce. What we have is we have a group, so we now have a Lincolnshire approach to developing, supporting working carers. So whilst we have got the information around LPFT and the work we're doing with our workforce, because we know the NHS is like ourselves struggling around retention, so we have got somebody out there as part of the provided commission service. They are working with employers, so they have got many opportunities, and what we've done is, rather than reinvent the wheel, there is a channel. So we go out to employers, we tell them things such as the carers' leavers' rights, HR policies, the carers' passports. Then they're invited to be part of a collective group so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of that passport. They can have different copies of ones and one which is suited to them. So that is part of the commission service, what we've got. And hopefully we'll get more employers on board as we go along.
Thank you, Lisa. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. Some colleagues within the room might consider this a peripheral activity. I can assure you it is not. In terms of the scale across Lincolnshire, the estimates, because it is a population estimate, is about 80,000 carers. The penetration rate that we have in Lincolnshire in supporting carers is very high. We've got typically around 10,000 carers now in whose lives we are involved. And that has been growing year on year over the last 8-9 years. If we compare ourselves with Derbyshire County Council, similar population, the number of carers they are engaged with is about 5,000. We have 10. So you'll appreciate the scale of the involvement. And of course, it's an all ages approach. My colleague Heather in Children's Services would recognise that in terms of young carers as well as adult carers, equally as important there. Though we're not there yet, if I may say, this is work in progress. I suspect it will be. There's always room for improvement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Glenn. Heather.
Thank you, Chair. So just again, I would echo what Glenn said. A really good report and really great to see the work that's going on here. I guess I'm just wondering, is there anything further we could do? It's a question to Lisa really to integrate, because there is fantastic work going on for young carers in Lincolnshire, and again our penetration to young carers in Lincolnshire is really positive, and schools are doing an amazing job, but we don't feature that on this plan. And I just wondered, do we need further integration, and would that be helpful, because there's a lot to celebrate there as well.
Michelle, did you want to comment on that or not?
I'm happy to pick up that discussion outside the meeting, Heather. I think any opportunity to bring things together more collaboratively or formally to support this agenda or others. And so I'm happy to work with Lisa and other colleagues. And I know we've had conversations about closer links with the ICB, etc., haven't we? So I'll pick that up outside the meeting as an action and work with Lisa and Heather on that. Yeah.
Thanks. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Right, this is a statement rather than a question, and it's just to agree with Glenn's point. From an LPFT perspective, the role of carers is absolutely not a marginal concern or activity. Carers are absolutely central to a lot of our patients' recovery, and absolutely central to our strategic direction as an organisation. So this work is really important, and the role of carers in shaping our services is really important. One of the challenges for us as a trust is to make sure that we hear carers properly, something I will confess we don't always do, but something we're committed to. So I just want to align myself with Glenn's comments.
Thanks for that. And I'm delighted, Lisa, that you'd actually mentioned CQC, because I've been going around doing some of these dummy runs for councils and with the CQC inspections, and we were told, you know, make sure you ask the questions on carers and unpaid carers. So really, really glad that you got that in. Thank you. Are there any more questions at all? No. Well, in that case, we will move to the actions required, which are at the bottom of the page. Note the report and the progress, agree the plan on a page, and as the first stage towards a revised carers strategy, discuss the opportunity for the carers delivery group to co-produce the revised strategy and promote and endorse the memorandum of understanding demonstrating system-led leadership to identify and support carers. Is everyone comfortable with that? And if so, would you raise your hands? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. We now move on to item 6C, which is the Homes for Independence paper. This item was circulated as part of the agenda pack, pages 37 to 42, and provides the board with an update on the progress being made on the housing and health priority. I'd like to invite Councillor William Gray, Chair of the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group, and Sean Johnson, the Programme Manager for Public Health, to present the report and then invite questions from the board. Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to present this report. As we've already heard earlier on in the meeting, Health and Wellbeing Board has already agreed that the Homes for Independence agenda will remain a priority in the joint health and wellbeing strategy, which is really great news for our residents. Because we need to remember that evidence shows that living in a familiar, safe, warm dwelling, a place to call home, is more likely to promote mental and physical well-being and reduce hospital admissions, social isolation and loneliness. So it's very, very important to us. Our vision is for people to live independently, stay connected, and have greater choice in where and how they live. So there are three main areas of work that we're presently looking at. Firstly, ensuring homes are safe, warm and dry to reduce falls or trips or prevent illnesses. Secondly, to maximise levels of independence for those who do have care and support needs through the use of small aids, equipment and adaptations. And thirdly, preventing homelessness and rough sleeping by addressing the underlying causes which lead to homelessness and early intervention. So just a little bit of background. Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group brings together partners to work in collaboration to cover those three main focus areas. And there's lots of partners and colleagues that come around the table. We have housing colleagues from each local authority area, the relevant housing portfolio cabinet members, representatives from the NHS, adult social care, the lead nurse responsible for hospital discharge and discharge, which is very important, people from DWP, fire and rescue, the police, a representative from the social housing providers, which we have many in our county, the Centre for Ageing Better, and public health. It's a really important mix of people. Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group was founded 6 years ago under the chairmanship of Councillor Wendy Bowcott, who's with us today, and I've chaired the group for the last 2 years. There are several officer working groups as detailed on page 38 of the report, and these groups coordinate the delivery of actions in our delivery plan. The main body of the report from page 39 onwards updates board members today on the four main areas of current activity. The first is a Good Homes Hub initiative and a one-stop shop for aids, equipment and adaptations. Work on this is ongoing. Pages of information are under development, which will go on the Connect to Support Lincolnshire website. Those who need support will be passed to a pilot caseworker, an advice service, as soon as funding for this pilot is agreed. And frontline workers and members of the public will be able to use the Healthy Home Assessment that is currently being tested and we'll hope soon will be launched. There's also the Better Care Fund and DFG funding workshop that we held in July, a very successful event. It was well attended and some of the colleagues who are in the chamber today were present at that. At our recent group meeting, a number of actions coming from that workshop were indeed agreed, And this builds on the work that's already being done to streamline and improve the process to assess and administer disabled facility grants. And this will also include looking at the allocation of some funding that would normally go to the district councils. There's been 2 applications from Lincolnshire to have funding from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. In fact, nearly £1 million has come into our county. And this will expand on the previous Links for Warmer Home service. East Lynn will have over £600,000. It will fund a 2-year programme. There'll be 4 energy advice workers and an electric energy bus, which will take information to support in our very rural areas. And lastly, the implementation of a refreshed Lincolnshire homeless and rural sleeping strategy is well underway. There are strategic leads leading on the 3 priority areas to increase the supply of accommodation, ensuring there is adequate and appropriate support for individuals to sustain their tenancies, which is very important, and improving those important relations with the mental health teams to access services to prevent cases becoming too complex. In fact, the report mentions several projects that are already underway and to include in the review of specialist accommodation. I hope, Madam Chair, I've just given a brief flavour of the great work that's being carried out through the Partners for Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group. I need to thank Councillor Wenda Bowkett for her foresight in setting up this particular group and the important work that it's done over the last few years. And indeed to Sean Johnson, who is our lead from Public Health, who greatly supports the work we do. I believe we're really making good progress, and we're really focused on those 3 key areas to ensure homes are safe, warm and dry, to maximise those levels of independence, and as I say, preventing homelessness and rural sleeping through that very early intervention. So I hope members will receive the report well.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Sean, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, Councillor Gray's covered everything.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up for questions from elsewhere, can you, either of you, tell us a little bit more about this healthy house assessment or healthy homes assessment? And I see there's just a couple of lines here about it's in its infancy, but are you trialling it on a geographical basis or just picking, what are you doing with it?
So it's a questionnaire that can be used in one of 2 ways. Either it can be completed by residents and householders themselves or somebody on their behalf, or it can be filled in by a frontline practitioner when they're visiting someone in their home. There are also 2 versions of the form, one when somebody's got a bit more time to sit down with a resident and complete a lengthier questionnaire, and one where somebody might be needing to get off to do their next job and can do a quicker assessment. So it's been trialled at the moment by the frontline workers rather than residents themselves filling it in. The reason for that is we're still building all the information that will sit behind the Good Home Hub and will feed the response to the Healthy Home Assessment. So once that's all in place and everything's lined up, then it will go live for the public to see and complete.
So presumably then it will potentially has the opportunity to flag up at an earlier stage then things like if there's a fire risk or a hoarding situation, or indeed if there's a burglary risk, etc. So does that mean then we'll be sharing that information with our partners?
Yeah, what you described is exactly right, Councillor Woolley, and yes, as soon as it's been trialled and is ready to go live, it will be shared widely together with some training available to partners to assist in completing the form.
Thanks for the update. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bowkett.
Well, I suppose I better speak, hadn't I? Thank you very much for that short presentation, Councillor Gray. That's much appreciated. I think everybody will agree this is a very important paper, really. Homes for Independence, and people living in a warm home will keep them from Andrew's door, basically. So we've still got lots to do. I mean, it's 6 years this has been going on, and we've still got things to do with our social housing. I know Councillor Gray's working very hard in East Lindsey, South Holland and Boston to upgrade, certainly in East Lindsey anyway, the social housing, because we have got lots of needs there. And also the complex cases, are homeless that are living on the streets that have mental health issues. We are looking at a plan there to buy some housing or rent some housing across the county to try and help them, to keep them off the streets basically, and try and get them into programmes and so that they're able to get back into their own accommodation, because we've got a huge issue, and it's not just the council, it's the police, the hospitals, mental health, everybody's involved in that. So we really do have lots of work to do on that, but it's a really good paper and we are doing lots of good work. So congratulations.
Thank you. Councillor Nanstead.
Thank you, Chair. I also sit on this group with Councillor Gray, and he does some really useful work, and some of the things in here, the Good Home Hub and the Healthy Home Assessment, potentially will be really good. One question is, the Healthy Home Assessment is on a trial at the moment. Do we know how long that trial is going to be before anything further happens? We have had a lot of discussion also about homelessness and rough sleeping and the issues which arise from that. There's clearly really big issues in finding places for people to live when they lose their homes. The private rented sector has changed. Certainly in Lincoln and in some of the other districts, there's virtually no accommodation available, which is covered by the local housing allowance. That puts people in difficulty if they have to top up, and there are ways around that, but it's still an issue. But there is also the issue of move-on accommodation, which everybody suffers from, because people get caught up in a system where they can't actually move on to more permanent accommodation. One thing the districts have discussed is the potential effects of Scampton, and Councillor Gray has raised some issues about Skegness and hotel residents in Skegness, but certainly in Scampton there is some concern about what happens if one of the residents goes missing for more than 7 days. Who is responsible for housing them when they're found, because it may be that their bed space has already been taken by somebody else. And certainly districts have concerns about whether we would be responsible.
Certainly a big question. I agree with you, Councillor Nanstead. I don't know, Michelle or Derek, did you want to respond to that?
Shall I come back about the Scampton question? These are all questions that we are raising with the Home Office through various fora. We await clarity around the answers. Clearly, it's raised also by chief execs from the two relevant district councils on behalf of all the chief executives. So definitely on the agenda. We don't have an answer, as Councillor Nanstead will know, but we'll keep pressing.
Thank you, Derek.
Would you like me to just come back and add any further clarity with regard to those comments that Councillor Nanstead made?
Yes, please, Councillor Gray.
Thank you. The trial, Councillor Nanstead, we're hoping by April next year, April 2024, trial will be all finished and over and will be out and it will be live. And you're quite right to raise the question of homelessness and rough sleeping, but it's all about early intervention, because once those people are homeless and rough sleeping, as you say, there's this knock-on effect with regard to their health, their mental health, getting them connected with the appropriate services, and the housing just isn't available. So it's early intervention all the way through, and that's why we're working very closely with our various partners, etc., to make sure that early intervention is there in place. And indeed, with regard to, you also mentioned the hotels in Skegness, that there are a number of asylum seekers which are now going through the process and they've now got refugee status. And again, we're working very closely with Serco as soon as they know that those asylum seekers have been given the relevant status and they're due to leave those hotels. We're working very closely with them, again, with the early intervention, so that we've got those agencies wrapped in around them to talk to them, to speak to them, to see what help and support can be given.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just looking at the local energy advice and the decarbonisation agenda, there's a question actually I did raise at full council at our last meeting. In terms of shifts in government policy, we're not too sure where we're going with that at the moment, but one hopes there'll be a little bit of an amnesty on the oil-fired boiler issue. Clearly this is going to affect, or it could have affected from September 26th, a lot of homes that are off-grid, that have got no alternative but have sort of carbon intensive fuels, so mainly oil, some wood, etc., some coal. Now these are generally probably, in terms of the harder fuels, are going to be more elderly people, and or certainly people looking to replace oil-fired boilers, which are very much more expensive than replacing a gas-fired boiler, I would note. That these people are supported in that when the time comes, because I think there's a great lack of knowledge out in our communities that this is the proposal, and that there are a few alternatives in the longer term or the medium term to accommodate this, other than spending, getting support from local government, or in the case of people who aren't entitled to support, finding those resources. And I suspect a lot of those people will not have those resources to find, because there can be not just £10,000 or £15,000. In some rural environments, there could be £25,000, £30,000. You need a borehole in your property, it's £49,000 just to drill the hole, not to upgrade the system. These are huge amounts of money. Even if people have got over the savings limits, they're just not going to be able to afford to do it. So one would hope the appropriate representations could be made to central government of the issues in rural areas, particularly like Lincolnshire. And also, I was interested just on another topic, just to look at the note that was made about hoarding. Obviously, is that an issue in Lincolnshire in general? And again, that comes back to mental health issues and has very serious consequences for fire safety and other personal health issues.
Okay, so who's going to answer that one then? I can tell you definitely that the hoarding is really one of those hidden issues, but that there's more of it than we really do know. I don't know whether, Derek, you wanted to mention that, but I don't know, Councillor Gray, did you want to answer about the energy side of things
with regard to
first?
home energy, a very good point made by Councillor Rawlings. But there is quite a raft of government grants available. So, as I mentioned, that East Lindsey has been very successful in getting £663,000 for this particular pilot. So there will be 4 home energy advice officers who will be going out into those rural communities to give advice to residents of what grants are available, because I can't remember the number of millions that East Lindsey has got available at this moment in time for particular types of grants to improve home energy and home efficiency, but it's making sure people are aware of it. And so that is the whole point of this bus going out there. But yes, with regard to making sure the central government is aware of it, lobby your MP. I mean, I'm constantly lobbying my own MP, Victoria Atkins, on various subjects, etc. As I know, East Lindsey District Council is lobbying Victoria Atkins and indeed Matt Warman MP. So lobby your MP so that they're aware of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you for that. Hoarding, Derek.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We do have a multi-agency hoarding approach, a strategy. It's on Lincolnshire County Council website, both in the general strategy sense, but there's also an icebreaker form that helps frontline staff understand how to have those conversations with individuals, and there's more detailed guidance. That guidance is with all our district councils, fire and rescue, I'm looking because I'm going to get one of these wrong, police service, NHS organisations, and obviously county council, safeguarding boards. So it really is quite a comprehensive issue. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, hoarding was recognised as a mental health challenge, and we have now a service that supports in place for that as well. So pretty comprehensive approach in Lincolnshire, I think, on hoarding protocols, and all the information's on the County Council website.
Thank you, Derek. Sean.
Yeah, if I could just add to what Councillor Gray said about the local energy advice demonstrators, I think Councillor Rollins is quite right. The recent announcements made in terms of relaxing some of the targets on being able to install gas and oil boilers will help, but there's a bit of catching up to do in that the current grant schemes and funding that is available for low-income householders does exclude replacement of oil boilers and pretty much gas boilers at the moment. So part of the reason why this is a demonstrator, and it was through application to the government, is for us to feed back to government on a monthly basis what we're learning through the advice we're giving and what the barriers are to people being able to decarbonise their homes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rawlings.
Just to come back on that point of actually the information that we have, do we have any central statistics of how many people this is actually going to affect by age group or social demographic? Because there's the point I made before, I wasn't aware that the grant schemes didn't include all fire boilers, which would be a huge problem to rural areas. But the fact that the grants are income assessed, so you're looking at I think the one I saw on West Lindsay's site the other day was a net income, a joint income for the household of 30,000 and fewer savings than 16,000, and a grant of 25,000, which for some requirements for some buildings, which require insulation on top of all the products to generate the heat, would be insufficient. So I would hope at some point we can collate those definitive figures to know what potentially the issues are going to be and do some lobbying as a consequence of that as an authority.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Yeah, I assume, Sean, that will be part of the work that these advisors will be drawing that information in, because as you've mentioned that they're fact-finding to take back to government. Is that fair?
That's absolutely correct, and also be part of the work of the housing intelligence function that's mentioned in the paper that Councillor Gray outlined, to understand the issues, the extent of the issues that are out there.
Thank you, Sean. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. If nothing else, this is an endeavour at Team Lincolnshire level across a whole range of different organisations that's, from a personal point of view, makes us stand out from the crowd. And of course, most of the decisions we make, whether they're NHS decisions or social care decisions, are also housing decisions. I think it's fair to say that the last 5 years, there was a housing condition survey that Lincolnshire had as part of a regional approach, which was led by Lincolnshire. It's unfortunate that was a moment in time, but when you recognise that 80% of the housing stock currently in Lincolnshire will still be in use in 2050, that's a long game plan and much to do to make sure that the housing is fit for purpose, and we do not start at a good level. So this deserves to be something high on colleagues' agenda in future years.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there any other questions at all? Okay, in that case, we will move to the action required, which is to note the good progress being made on the current work stream for the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group. Everyone in favour, can you raise your hands? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. We now move to item 6D, which is the Lincolnshire Better Care Fund. This item was circulated as part of the agenda pack, pages 43 to 58, and it provides the board with an update on the Better Care Fund. I'm going to invite Glenn Garrett, our Executive Director of Adult Care and Community Wellbeing, to present the report and then invite questions from the board. I've got a little note here that you've got somebody coming with you, but I can't see them anywhere. So are you reporting alone, Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to cover that as well, yes. I am alone.
Okay, fire away then.
Thank you, colleagues. And I noticed that the Chair didn't look up to see who was fielding the item. I'm clearly typecast in the role. So Paul Summers, who's the Better Care Fund manager for our local system, on Monday decided to catch a cold. The consequence is that he's lost his voice. So I'm filling in. But yes, all best wishes to Paul on a speedy recovery, please. The Better Care Fund, as members of this committee will be familiar, has been given a new lease of life recently with a 2-year narrative plan that was submitted by the local system in Lincolnshire, along with all of our regional colleagues, for regional sign-off. 2 weeks ago, we received our formal letter that the Better Care Fund plan for Lincolnshire was approved. In particular, for this round, it was a 2-year plan, which also gained additional political profile nationally because it contained certain expectations around managing winter pressures, which included an additional sum from government for the next 2 financial years to cover those winter pressures. The reporting arrangements are also new and far more onerous than they have ever been in the 7-8 years since the original BCF started, involving both fortnightly and monthly reporting. Monthly reporting on BCF, fortnightly reporting on winter pressures and the use of funding and how our acute colleagues are coping with the months to follow. There has been feedback to government, which I understand ministers are minded to hear, in that most of the current reporting is duplicating existing efforts, and wouldn't it be more sensible to combine them so that we have more routine reporting that's less onerous, that allows us to spend more time on running services. That has been received, and I understand that in the next 2-3 months we may well get a different template. But it is clearly the case that both government and local systems are very focused on the coming winter months and how that will play out. And it's not without some relevance that, of course, this winter may well prove to be the last winter before a national election. So that's worth noting for this committee. So those items within the performance report that detail those elements around how our acute colleagues are coping with winter pressures will be increasingly relevant, particularly as we come to the end of quarter 2 and certainly quarter 3. The priority areas in this particular plan also followed national guidance requirements, and in particular looking at intermediate care services. That is already work in progress in Lincolnshire, led by colleagues both within the County Council and the ICB, the Integrated Care Board. It should deliver in the coming months an integrated plan for intermediate care, which brings together a collection of services to increase their focus, improve the overlaps between them, and reduce duplication. This isn't about necessarily spending more than we already do. It's much more about spending what we already do better and finding common purpose, which includes areas such as occupational therapy activity, as well as the reablement service, which is also contained within the performance report that's attached. The reablement service, as part of the intermediate care plan, also will incorporate alongside it a number of additional investments, such as the active recovery beds. At the moment, during the summer months, they're 40 in number, dotted around the county. That will rise, as planned, to 60, possibly more, during the winter months when we expect the peak in demand to arise. I think it's fair to say that there are significant other factors at play at the moment, and I don't know whether Andrew wants to say any more about the current strike action with consultants and junior doctors, which is having a direct effect on acute flow and putting pressure on the system, which in turn will change as Derek will no doubt update us in due course. Further viral infections begin to affect the population, and not least the working population. There's always something to look forward to, Chair. I think it's also fair to say that this particular BCF incorporates updated details on the DFG allocation, which was recently announced by ministers, of an additional £608,000 to the Lincolnshire system. I noticed in the earlier report on housing, the point made by colleagues that the distribution formula is probably run past its sell-by date. And I think this is an opportunity where the local system could move ahead of the national one in finding, again, common purpose where it's most needed in that additional allocation. And I know that district council colleagues are already having those debates. The performance report is attached. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Glenn. Andrew, did you want to add anything at all?
I believe that's called a hospital pass from my colleague, literally there. Yes, I mean, picking up that whole question of flow and winter, I think what we're finding at the acute part of the group at the moment is lots of sicker patients, not just people turning up with what we might call minor conditions. Sicker people, they take more time to work up, we admit more of them. That obviously causes a backlog at the front door while we do that, and we end up admitting more, as I say. So Glenn's absolutely right. Flow, really, really important. Still got issues with delayed discharges, issues at the back door and issues at the front door. Bearing in mind that situation, we could certainly do without industrial action, it would be fair to say. We had 3 days last week, 1 day of which was joint junior doctors and consultants. We've got 3 further days of industrial action next week, with all 3 days being joint action by juniors and consultants. So we will have a Christmas Day cover on those 3 days. That quite clearly puts significant pressure and increased risk on our urgent and emergency care provision, and puts significant pressure on planned care. So all of those cancellations of diagnostic tests, outpatients, operations, etc. So yes, it's, you know, I think the sun is out at the moment, but we're absolutely into the winter period. It's clearly going to be a difficult period again. And the other consequence of strikes is the financial cost to us, which is not something that we are provided extra money for. Well into 7 figures now that it's cost ULHT, and it rises every time there is a strike, as we pay very high rates to cover shifts. So all in all, a difficult situation. It is one we are assuming will continue throughout the winter. There's no sign of that ending in any way, shape or form, so therefore we have to plan for what we know. Sadly, we've become used to planning for industrial action. All of the hard work is in the planning. The actual delivery of it on the days themselves sometimes feels like the easier part of it. Then you have all the recovery period, and the shorter those time periods between one set of action and the next, the more difficult it becomes. And I won't raise the issues of the impact on staff morale and weariness as this continues. So back to the agenda topic as such, anything we can do around the Better Care Fund, all well and good. Absolutely agree with Glenn, this isn't just about throwing money at a problem, it's also not about just doing more of the same. If we think more of the same is the answer to the current situation, it's not. It has to be a transformation of the service, and I know everyone in the room would agree with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Glenn at all on the BCF? Heather.
Thank you. It's a question, Glenn, about page 56. Can you just help me understand why we haven't got any planning on expected capacity? I'm sure there's a reason, but...
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just heading for page 656. Bless you. I am getting there. Sorry, Chair. Yes. So on this particular report, there's a number of areas of service which are currently being updated as a result of the additional funding which was allocated post-June. So those figures will be updated for the next report, which goes to region in October. So the second quarter's report, you should see a shift. The general expectation of the government, of region, and of this committee should be that those numbers should, as it were, grow in terms of our ability to meet growing demand. And that's why ministers have a very high profile monitoring function on our spend against performance and activity. Of course, that is challenged in a system which is geographically very diverse, because it's all down to people being able to do the work. And as Andrew has already alluded, and Melanie might also comment, finding the workforce at one of the worst moments in the year is always going to be a challenge. At least this year, the government allocated the money and gave us notification much earlier than they have done previously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Glenn. Councillor Nanstad.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. First of all, about intermediate care. There used to be a system where Lincolnshire had their own intermediate care homes, which allowed patients to be moved perhaps quicker out of hospital, particularly you mentioned sicker patients who perhaps aren't ready to go home, and then they would get perhaps more frequent physio and help before they went home. Have you considered going back to that? That's one point. Because it seemed to work quite effectively for some people who otherwise will be at home and not get a great deal of assistance, because they might get a once a week visit from a physio. But I know, of course, you've got people who are now sicker, and perhaps they're having to stay in hospital longer than they were previously. The second point you mentioned about DFGs and the formula. Obviously, there are a lot of areas where government money is distributed where various councils have issues with the formula. So it's not just this, there's all sorts of things, and not just in health. And sometimes councils get the impression it's done randomly. It may not be, but there are issues. It's not the only area where there are issues. I think, for instance, one of the disappointments for the districts in the additional funding was that it was portrayed as going to be available to be spent in a certain way, and actually it isn't. It's the same as DFG money generally. And I don't think there was much warning of that, the fact that there was a change on that. So I don't want to get into an argument about other things, but that's my point.
Thank you, Chair. I think if I take the last one first, the DFG is, of course, above my batting average, and, of course, sits with district councils, even though it's filtered through the BCF. I think it's down to the local system and colleagues to determine whether that is adequate for the purposes, but not for me. In terms of intermediate care, this is a soapbox moment. I inherited the in-house intermediate care service 12 years ago. We spent 3 times more then than we do now on a highly bureaucratised, inadequate service that was performing badly and didn't cover the whole county. We then experimented with a transfer to an NHS trust, which I think because of it was an unfamiliar service block, although the trust was committed to making it work, really struggled to do that. It then went to an independent organisation, and I'm not here to argue public good, private bad, or vice versa, but the current service is one of the best in the country. It is provided by an independent organisation, and it is 1/3 the cost that I inherited today 10 years ago. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, there was a third question around the DFGs, but I think I've covered that in my first response.
Thank you, Glenn. Any further questions at all? 1/3 of the cost. That's a huge amount of money, isn't it?
I did say it was a soapbox moment, Chair.
Got you. Okay, thank you everyone. If there are no more questions, then can we move to the actions required, which is to note the update provided on the Better Care Fund plans, to note the update on the discharge winter funding, and to note the Q1 BCF performance report. Can you all raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. If you disagree, if you wish to abstain. Thank you. Move on to the next item, which is the action log of previous decisions. I don't intend going through them. They're merely for noting on pages 59 to 60. But can I just have you agreeing that you're in favour of them? If you would raise your hands, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay. And finally, the forward plan, which again is for noting on pages 61 to 63. Again, all in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, everyone. I now close this particular meeting. As you're aware, the ICP meeting will follow, but we have to wait because it's a public meeting until 4 o'clock. So if you would like to go and get coffees from the members or teas from the members, you're very welcome to do so. But I can't speed it up at all. Thank you.